In this video, we're going to talk about when and how to use italics and quotation marks when writing in APA 7. So let's jump in. So the use of italics is sometimes confusing to new writers in APA 7 format or APA format. So let's look at the table that APA Style provides with us on when to use italics. So we should use italics the first time we mention a key term or a phrase, and especially when it's identified or accompanied by a definition. So in this example, the writer used mindfulness as the key term with the expectation that mindfulness will be talked about throughout the paper. And then the writer went on to define what mindfulness is according to this particular author. So mindfulness is italicized this first time, however, it would not be italicized in subsequent uses. We also italicize titles of books or reports or web pages or any standalone work that we've referenced. In this example, the writer has used the assessment and treatment of older adults, and the subtitle is a guide for mental health professionals. This is italicized within our work. We'll talk later about a reference page when this would not be italicized, but within the body of your writing, the body of your work, this would be italicized. We also italicize the titles of periodicals, journals, along with the volume number. However, we do not italicize the comma between. So in this example, American Journal of Nursing would be italicized. The comma would not be italicized. Volume number 119 would be italicized. And then you can see, we'll talk later about this in our video on how to write reference pages. The volume is italicized and the issue is not, nor is the parentheses surrounding the issue. So American Journal of Nursing, italicized. The volume number, 119, italicized. The comma and the issue number and the page numbers are not italicized. Moving on, we also italicize English letters when they're used as statistical symbols or algebraic variables. So in this example, the M for mean, the SD for standard deviation are italicized. The T, if you're talking about the T variable, talking about an independent t-test, or the Cohen's D in the statistical measurement. So if you're using it as a statistical symbol or a variable, it's then italicized. We also italicize anchors of a scale. We don't italicize the associated number. So if you're using a sliding scale, Likert scale, anything like that, you would italicize the anchor of the scale or the word associated with the number on the scale. So if 1 is poor, 5 is excellent, the numbers would not be italicized. However, the anchor words would be italicized. On a Likert scale, similarly, the numbers for your Likert scale would not be italicized. If you used anchor words, then those words would be italicized. And it's important to note each of those words would be italicized. Strongly disagree, neutral, strongly, or agree and strongly agree. And also the first use of a word or a phrase or an abbreviation from another language, especially if your reader is not familiar with that language. So if you use any first use of a foreign word in a foreign language other than the native language of the writing, not your native language, the native language of the writing, those would be italicized. If the term appears in a dictionary for the language in which you are writing, you don't italicize it. Those are probably a rare instance, but you wouldn't italicize that. So certain times when you should not use italics, So if it's the titles of a book series, for instance, the author here uses the Harry Potter series. So you would not italicize in your writing if you just said the Harry Potter series states XYZ. However, if you specifically list a title of a book in the Harry Potter series, so Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, or Harry Potter the Goblet and the Goblet of Fire, then you would then italicize that specific title, that book title. We already talked about the punctuations inside that follow a journal and a volume. The comma there is not italicized, and the volume there is not italicized, nor are the page numbers. But so those are the things that are not italicized. Words, phrases, and abbreviations of a foreign origin, again, if they appear in the dictionary for the language which you are writing, those would not be italicized. So a priori, per se, ad lib, some of those would be in the English dictionary if you're writing in English, so you would not italicize those. Next, let's talk about using italics for emphasis. So in general, you should avoid using italics to emphasize words if you can reword your sentences and provide that emphasis. However, if you cannot reword it and it be logical, best fit, then it's okay to use italics for emphasis. Or if the emphasis might be lost in the material or might be misread. So in the following example, the author has italicized prior and after to kind of draw emphasis, because that emphasis might be lost in the reading if you do not italicize those words, because the author specifically wants you to focus on what is prior to engaging in a creative endeavor, and then what happened after the person engaged in this creative task. So if you need to draw that clear distinction, for instance, if you introduce an intervention in an experiment and you need to draw that attention to this is what happened after or before the participant engaged in this intervention, and this is what was after, then it's okay to use the italics, but don't just throw out italics to draw emphasis to words that you feel should be emphasized. Make sure that there's a distinct reason and there's something that needs to be impressed upon the reader. Also, if you use italics inside a direct quote, be sure that you put in brackets emphasis added, so that your reader knows this is your emphasis and not the original author's emphasis. Next, there's a thing called reverse italics. So that's when items that you would normally italicize are not going to be italicized. And so for this example provided shows the title of a table. And so we know we are going to italicize the title of a table. We also should italicize in as it is used in statistical measures. However, we're going to not italicize it because the title of this table is italicized. And so when we reverse that rule, that's called reverse italics. Next, let's look at the use of quotation marks. This is a one that is often confused in in-text citations when we do and do not use quotation marks. And so let's look at when we do. We use quotation marks when we are referencing a specific letter, word, or phrase, or a sentence that's used as a linguistic example or as itself. So, what I mean by that is, in this example, we are referencing what the student wrote. So we would put those double quotes around exactly what the student wrote. We also use quotation marks to present stimuli in a text. In this example, the stimulus words were groceries, cleaning, overtime, and office. Long list of stimuli might be better presented in a table, but if you choose to present them in a list of words or in sentence format, then you would need to identify each of those words with its own set of quotation marks. We also use italics to reproduce material from a test item or maybe verbatim instructions to participants. In this example, the item was, how often do you feel happy with your body? And the second item of the test or survey was, how often do you exercise? So you're going to set those apart with quotation marks because you are referencing that specific material, that specific question. We also, the first time you use a word in an ironic fashion, an ironic comment, or as slang, you would use quotation marks to set that word apart. So in this example, considered normal behavior, if it really were considered normal behavior, you would not put the quotation marks around the word normal. But if you are writing an ironic statement or using irony, then you would then set normal apart with quotation marks, and that lets your reader know that you're using irony or sarcasm, things of that nature. Also, around the title of a periodical article or book chapter, when the title is used inside the text. You don't use quotation marks in a reference list entry, and we're going to talk about reference list entries in a separate video. But if you're using the title of a work inside the text, specifically an article, journal article, magazine article, newspaper article, or a book chapter, you are going to use quotation marks to reference that chapter. So you have your in-text citation here, Sherman's, who's the author, 2019 is the reference. Again, we'll talk about in-text citations in a separate video. But Sherman's 2019 article, The Art of Giving Feedback, addresses how nurses can give effective feedback. So again, the title of Sherman's article that was published in 2019 would have quotation marks, double quotation marks around it in that instance. When do we not use quotation marks? Again, this is when we're going to use italics, which we talked about in the first part of the video. So use italics rather than quotation marks when you're highlighting a key phrase that's followed by a definition. You use italics rather than quotation marks when you're talking about your anchor words on your scale. Also, when you're referring to the numeral as itself, you would not put the numeral 2 and put quotation marks around the 2. And lastly, if you are not trying to emphasize or if you're trying to downplay the meaning of a word. So the teacher rewarded the class with tokens. There's no irony, there's no sarcasm, and there's no trying to add emphasis to the word rewarded, right? So you would just simply say the teacher rewarded the class with tokens. If you were to put quotation marks around that, that would indicate that you are using irony or sarcasm or something of that nature. So if you're simply stating that the teacher rewarded the class with using tokens, you would leave those quotation marks off.